everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome back to my sewing room. Today we are starting on a brand new project and I have been waiting to start on this project for I think about 7 or 8 months at this point, because I am going to be reproducing my 1890s tea gown. I'm so excited! If you have not seen the video on examining this 1890s tea gown, which is an extant antique piece in my collection, I will link that up above and down below in the description. But as soon as I got this tea gown, I just knew I needed this in my life. That said, this tea gown is made out of brown linen and I don't like linen and I don't like brown. So I am going to be making this out of blue lightweight wool instead. And I felt like that was kind of perfect for this time of year as well. I'm hoping that I can finish it in time to just wear nice cozy tea gown things around the house, that sort of thing. And I'm just really excited to be able to look at a side-by-side comparison of my antique tea gown and then the tea gown that I'm making. So I am going to be starting with Truly Victorian TV432 to make this tea gown. That's that one right there. Now this is an 1880s tea gown and mine is an 1890s tea gown, but honestly they are pretty similar. The biggest difference with mine is that there's going to be an applied yoke on the outside, because on the inside structure layer of the cotton of my tea gown, it's all one piece, but on the outside it has a pleated yoke section that's edged in trim. And so I'm going to be doing that as that external section. And then also obviously I've got to have the giant 1890 sleeves, because what's 1890s without those sleeves? So I'm going to be using this pattern though really for the whole body of the dress, I think. Mine doesn't have buttons all the way down. Mine only has closures part way down and then is sewn shut the rest of the way. So I will be adapting that as well. But I think that this should pretty much work for most of my pattern. The other thing about mine, I guess, is that the Watteau pleats on mine start below the yoke. They don't go all the way up to the top. So there will definitely be some adaptations that I have to make to this pattern as I go, but I think that it will be a pretty good base. So what I'm going to do to start out with, I've already cut out the pattern and I'm going to cut out a mock-up. Now, I haven't really used enough Truly Victorian patterns to say, oh yes, I always need to lengthen things or not. So I'm a little torn on whether to do that. I'm probably going to look at the pattern, see if it just doesn't make sense measurement-wise between shoulder and waist, and if so, I'll lengthen it in the front because my backs rarely need lengthening. And also, as far as the mock-up goes, I'm only going to be doing the mock-up to about high hip length, because otherwise that's just such a waste of fabric and I don't want to waste all of that fabric into the train and all of that sort of stuff, which I don't know if I'm going to do a train because I don't think mine has a train, but also I love how dramatic it is. So I'll cross that bridge when I get to cutting out the actual. But I'm really excited to start on this project. So I am going to cut out my mock-up and I will come back to you when I have that all sewn together. So before I actually go and cut out my mock-up, I wanted to take another look at this lovely lady here and just really study how exactly she's made up, particularly inside, but also to a lesser degree outside. Now, I already mentioned that this yoke section, that's just applied to the top. So I can really just ignore that section. Really anything from the neck up decorative wise, I can just ignore that. So it's really the inside that I'm studying. And also I'm going to take some more detailed measurements of just how big the skirt panels are. I think that was all in my video, but if I can take those measurements and then translate them from her tiny little itty bitty size to my size, then I'll get a better idea of the scale of what I need and the sizes and everything. And one of the things here that I'm probably not going to be able to do is that her front panel is all cut on one. It's not got a seam or anything. Now, again, this pattern actually has a closure in the center front, and I don't really want those buttons running all down there. Plus I would need 500,000 buttons. So she closes up up with hooks and eyes up in the upper half, and then is just a flat panel down at the bottom. What I will probably do is have a seam down the center front that then the part up here will close with hooks and eyes like this does, because I'm going for as close as I can with this, just obviously with a different fabric. But the inner portion really is, I think, pretty true to this 1880s pattern. I mean, we've got two darts in the front. We have the pleats here, as I mentioned, they start a little lower, so that's a little different, but I believe that the fabric makeup is still the same. I'm really gonna have to double check that because it does almost seem, and I'm trying to remember, you know, I wanted to go rewatch my video and stuff too, but I wanted to pull her out also. I'm trying to remember how exactly it's made up as far as the panels and everything go, because I kind of thought that her pleats might be on a separate panel, but I can't remember. So I'm going to do some studying, see how it's made up. I'm not going to do historical techniques on mine. I'm probably not going to put boning in mine, and I'm certainly not going to leave a pin in mine like she did. But I do want to get a better idea of the shape and the scale that I want so that I can get those proportions right on the pattern, starting with my mock-up as opposed to in the final. So I'm going to take some measurements and some pictures and see what I need to do to the pattern and let you know what that is. So naturally, now that I'm really looking in depth at this, I'm noticing a lot of differences. For one, this actually has 4 Watteau pleats all stacked. The interesting thing is that they're all narrower pleats than what's in the Truly Victorian pattern here, but this comes to a total of 14.75 inches on each side, basically. That's all pleated up into there. And what's interesting is that this from here to here is a total of 14 5/8 inches. So they're actually super, super close. It's just that these pleats are hugely deep, whereas the other 4 are progressively smaller. I actually took all of my measurements here. So it's 2 5/8 inch is the deepest one, and then 1 7/8, 1 5/8, and then the top one is 1 underneath, 1.5 over the top. So that pleat underneath here, it doesn't actually go to the center of the line here. And that's the other thing. Speaking of the center line here, I already knew that there was a seam up the back of this, but it's really complicated. So it turns out that this seam right here, this side back seam, this isn't actually a panel, a whole separate panel. This comes together, oh, it's past where I folded it. Comes together right there. That's the end of that. So that's actually cut with 2 pieces coming up from a skirt, and then that excess is just removed, and those are done together like that. So that's different because the Truly Victorian one, as you can see here, has 2 separate entirely panels all the way down to the bottom. And this one, to make up for the fact that that isn't a real panel, there's actually a gusset in the bottom of the skirt. Let's see if I can locate it. Oh, there we go. There's a gusset on either side right here. It's just a little guy. One side is 7 5/8 inches wide, and the other side is 7 1/8 inches wide. So, you know, really uniform. So yeah, that is there to make up for the difference. The total hem circumference, by the way, is 97 inches, and the waist size is 26 inches with a bust of 33 inches. So if I actually take that to scale using algebra, that would mean that I would need a hem size of somewhere between 141 and 149 inches, and that seems a little excessive. This pattern here has a hem of 122 inches, so as long as I am over this, but less than 149, anywhere in there is going to be fine. And let's see, some of the other differences. So this center back seam, well, not this one, but the one that's actually underneath for structure, it's really funky. It is done like this tuck right here. And what this is doing is actually having all of the fabric, you can see a little better here, having all of the fabric folded in this way and then just like stitched together here. You can see this running stitch in here, and it's stitching it together basically where this pattern right here tells you that it is stitch here for Watteau pleats. that is coming together at the center back, but on mine, on the antique one, it's being brought inside, whereas this actually tells you to put it to the outside, and that's probably maybe because this is on the fold, whereas mine is actually a cut piece right there. So, and there's other differences too. I mean, for one thing, this one has pockets, which, yeah, I am definitely doing pockets in mine because these are also huge pockets. I think I measured them in my other video and they wound up being like 8 or 9 inches deep. They're humongous, and obviously I need that, but they've got to be wider than this because, yeah, that's like not gonna work for me. So I need a bigger pocket. So yeah, this is all of my notes now as far as things that are going on. So there's a lot going on, and now the question is whether I want to really completely follow what's going on here, or if I want to adapt this pattern and really put together this pattern, but change things like the pleats, because that's a really big visual difference, and change things like, I mean, that's the biggest one. The closures in the front, the big visual things. I am not going to do the train, by the way. This does not have a train, and I don't need a train if I'm going to be wearing this around the house. That's a little bit silly, even if it is dramatic. So yeah, I've got some decisions to make, because like doing this as 2 separate pieces just does seem to make sense. I mean, yeah, it's just practical. Whereas cutting it this way is maybe not. Luckily my fabric is wide, so doing things like changing around where the seam lines are, like even potentially cutting the front all in one piece, I think I could actually fit that on my fabric. The question is, do I want to? So I've got some thinking to do before I pattern out the mock-up for this, because just how close do I want to get to this lovely little 1890s beauty here? I mean, obviously, I want mine to look like this, but just how much like this? So I've been really struggling with the idea of the design changes to this tea gown, but I've kind of determined that I'm not making an exact reproduction anyway, because I'm making this out of the blue wool instead of the brown linen. And so because of that, I don't think it's imperative that I follow the exact same pattern pieces of my extant tea gown. And part of that is stemming from the fact that I have since been waffling about this for like hour plus, I think, at this point, and I have pored over those interwebs and looked for other tea gowns, both in the 1890s and also in the 1880s. And I've kind of come to the conclusion that my tea gown is a very 1880s style tea gown in body, but then with 1890s sleeves and like the neckline collar treatment is a little more 90s. And in the 1880s, that's when you had that plainer style of tea gown, but almost all of them button up the front. I couldn't find a single one that has a closure like mine. And in the 1890s, the fashionable tea gown has really transformed into that look of that kind of like robe style garment with like the underneath garment that has the sleeves and the front like ruched bit showing. And it's really changed from the 1880s tea gown, more like my tea gown, into that almost totally different garment that just still has typically the Watteau pleats in the back. And so now obviously my antique one, she was not a lady that was like a well-to-do, entertains all day type lady. Like, this is a brown linen sturdy stuff tea gown, and it's a little bit more of a wrapper, I would almost say, or a house gown than your fancy, let me, you know, greet guests type tea gown. And then also when you think of it in that context as a wrapper and a dressing gown, this doesn't make sense to not have a front closure, because to take this on and off, you're going to have so much weight pulling from the back and yet not a very big opening to get it off of you. So it's going to be hard to get on and off without that button front closure all the way down that you could open as far as you want, or you could leave shut or whatever. And the final kind of nail in the coffin here of deciding to do a button front closure and some other design element changes was that I actually laid out some buttons on the tea gown. I'll pop a picture of this up here, but I laid some buttons down on the tea gown and looked at what it looked like with the buttons versus without the buttons. And it actually looks so much cuter with the buttons than without. So I guess I'm gonna have to do a whole ton of buttons on here because I like it with buttons better. And kind of in making that decision of doing the buttons, I've also decided that some of those other design elements that aren't things that jump out at you, I'm also going to change. So that means that I can really use the truly Victorian tea gown pattern as my pattern and just make the design changes for those elements that are really significantly different. So obviously I was always going to change it to have 1890 sleeves. I was always going to change it to have that yoked collar and the fold over collar because the pattern has like a little standing collar. And obviously like I can't make it without pockets because mine has such wonderful, brilliant pockets. And then the other big design element on mine is that the Watteau pleats do have 4 folds in the pleats and that they're just shallower pleats. So I'm gonna make all of those design elements. I have to be careful because Dora just came into the room. Hi, Dora. We're just gonna hold you so you don't get near my tea gown. So she likes to jump up on the table and my antique is on the table, so she's not allowed to right now. But anyway, I am just going to make those design changes that are really the significant parts of this outfit and incorporate those designs into the truly Victorian tea gown. And I think that that will be better for my sanity and also still look cute and really still bring to light the original tea gown. Again, that main obvious difference is going to be the button front closure. Everything else is just going to be things that you would really hardly see at all, like cutting the side back pieces as a full separate piece. And I still don't know if I'm going to cut the very center back on the fold or not. Guess I should make that decision. I don't see why I wouldn't, but I don't know. I would have to make sure that there's enough width to add a little bit of extra width in the pattern, enough width in my fabric to add a little bit of extra width in the pattern because my extant one, the Watteau pleats were just slightly deeper. So yeah, okay, now I'm feeling better about things and I'm feeling comfortable enough to put my antique lovely lady away and start cutting out my muslin. So Dora, tell them bye for now. And we'll meet again when I go to put the muslin together. Bye! Oh, I almost forgot to mention, but as far as other actually like fitting changes go, I'm going to cut out the size J on this pattern because it might be a little bit large at the waist, but that should fit my bust just nicely. But I am going to increase the length of the center front down from the neckline to the waist by 1 inch. And then at the side, I'm going to just do 1/2 inch of an increase from below the arm because actually from here to under the arm seemed like the right length, which was odd to me. So I think I'm just gonna go for 1/2 inch there. And then the skirt length is, I know it looks short on long on Antoinette because she is shrinking, but I actually need to increase it by 5 inches according to what the finished length is down here. Now granted, this does call for a 2-inch hem. Mine doesn't have a 2-inch hem. It just folded up and has a little bias facing, or maybe not bias, but it's got a little strip of something for the facing. But I'm gonna go ahead and lengthen it by 5 inches and I can always cut that off. Now of course the mock-up, again, I'm not going down that far, so I hope that's what I need, but I will be doing the mock-up to about this level here so that I can get past the darts. All right, so the mock-up is assembled. That said, it is definitely not right because I forgot to add that extra width in the pleats in the back. So I was able to get 3 pleats in doing the measurements that I had taken off of the extant one. And so these are the 3 bottom pleats, but I ran out of fabric before I could make the top pleat. So I do want to do 4 pleats, so I'm gonna have to add more fabric to the actual one. I have not tried this on yet, but I mean, it looks nice on Antoinette, which does make me a little bit worried because it's a little long in the shoulder, but normally my bodices are longer in the shoulder on Antoinette. Antoinette's very short-waisted compared to me. As far as the size around, it looks right because it's fitting her pretty much like the rest of my bodices fit her, so I feel like that's a good sign. And the pleats do look really, really pretty on the back. The other thing is I'm pretty sure that these pleats are starting too high up the back currently, but I didn't want to overcut. I would rather cut that off later. So I did start them down. I cut them down about 3 inches or so from the top of the neck, as opposed to the pattern, which is following the neckline, because this will have that applied yoke on it. But I think that really the pleats will wind up starting kind of about here as opposed to here. So overall, I am happy with how it looks so far. I do also worry that, I don't know, it feels tight on Antoinette's hips. So I'm gonna have to examine how that is when I put it on, which will be tomorrow because it is past my bedtime. So I will see you again tomorrow when I'm trying on my mock-up. Okay, so I have the mock-up on and I put it on over a petticoat, but that's it. Well, I mean, the corset, obviously. But as far as other undergarments go, it's just the petticoat and chemise and corset. And there are definitely a lot of things that need changing. One thing that I've done already is I've drawn a pink line here for my new cut line for the shoulder, because as you can see, this is way off the shoulder. I don't know why it's going this far out, because to be honest, I would have expected better from a truly Victorian pattern, because this is like 1860s out here or something. Like, this is not an 1880s pattern. So that's the first thing that I noticed there. And then the other big issue is that it's actually not large enough. So this is supposed to have an overlap for buttons, which generally means, I think like a 1 inch or ½ inch. I can never remember how to do buttons. But anyway, it needs some overlap for the buttons. I think it's like each side should go past the center front by a ½ inch so that it creates a 1 inch overall, or even 1½ inch overall. Like if it's going past 3/4 inch and 3/4 inch, creating a 1½ inch. It's generally, I think, what you do for buttons. And right now I'm barely getting ½ inch to be able to like pin it closed, just barely, over from basically like the bust point to the waist, and actually it continues down. It's way too tight over the hips too. And in fact, the hips, I think, overall are a big problem area. You can see all of these wrinkles that are happening right here, and that's because the back is being pulled forward by the hips. Now, part of this could be that this is a pattern for the wrong era. This is 1880s, and so it wants to be a little slimmer, I think, in the front, but also it's just too small. So I need to slit probably this side seam open down here to see if I can like pull this bit back a little and see just how much needs to be added to there. I think that's going to be the main thing. I mean, there is the seam here also, so that might also need to be opened. I'm not really sure yet. I'm going to have to play with it. And then also, I think this needs to be opened a little too, because this is feeling very huggy right here, which would be fine for 1880s, which again this pattern is, but I'm doing 1890s and we don't want the huggy bit here. We want it to flare out a little bit more, so that needs to be opened as well. So a lot of things need to be opened up here, and then I actually do have too much, or really I have, I think, what I need here for a button overlap, but compared to everywhere else it's too much, so I need to be adding some excess there. But I think it's just in the center front, because my side seams feel like they're hitting right on my sides. So I think that's pretty perfect. I think it's the front that needs to be larger, not the back, other than at the hips where everything needs to be larger. So yeah, a lot of tweaks to make. This is why I cut it out in a hip length thing instead of a full length, because at the very least, no, I'm gonna have to recut everything because of the hips, honestly. I can't even just recut the fronts. I'm gonna have to do a whole other mock-up once I figure out how much I need. So I'm gonna open some stuff up and play around with these hips. I'll show you kind of what I determine needs to happen here. And then I think I'm also gonna cut off the excess with the arm size as well, just so you can see what that should look like. And then other stuff like the center front, I'm gonna add that to my next mock-up. All right, so I've done some of those things. I cut up the arm size. I think that at this point, when I take in the 1/2 inch seam allowance from there, I think I'll be just about right. I might need 3/4 of an inch. We shall see. And then also I slit this open. As you can tell, I actually slit all of them open, but I'm not sure that there's really anything wrong with this one. I think if anything, the waist actually needs to be dropped, and then I need the skirts to flare out a little bit more dramatically from where I've dropped the waist. So that I'm gonna have to play around with, I guess. But I've opened this up and it's significant where it wants to land. I mean, basically I need a 2-inch insert like by here. So I'm going to make these pieces flare out way more significantly so that I can get the 2 inches by here and then like 3.5 inches by here, and then who knows from there. As far as the front goes, I've marked where the center front line is, and then from there I'm going to add, or from that, no, I guess from 1/2 inch out from that mark, because in some cases it's less than 1/2 inch, I'm going to add 0.75. So basically I need 1.25 inches out from the center front line all the way up, which up here I think I've already got, but the rest of it, it's going to have to be flared out a little bit more. And I will probably also flare it out maybe a little bit more here. It's hard to tell because it's past, like I probably needed to go a little bit longer of a mock-up, which maybe I should do another mock-up that would then go a little farther. But to be honest, like I feel comfortable with my measurements of what I need here, and I kind of just want to cut the actual wool. Oh, though I need to add stuff for pleats too in the back, so I don't know. Really, really tempted to not cut another mock-up. I might have to think on that for the next like 20 minutes. But anyway, I mean, I'm feeling like in a much better place with this mock-up, and I think I am, yeah, happy with the changes that I know I need to make. So one of the issues that I'm having here is that I'm cutting out the center back piece right now, and it's supposed to be cut on the fold, but the cotton sateen that I'm using for the liner is not actually wide enough for this piece, let alone when I go to add 2.5 extra inches this way because I wanted to get that last pleat in. It technically wasn't even wide enough before then, but I could have pieced just like a little bit down at the corner. But since I remember that I needed to add that extra, actually it's going to be, I'm going to have to add a 9-inch strip all the way down the center back. Hopefully not on the wool, hopefully just on the cotton, because the wool is wider, so it shouldn't have that problem. Fingers crossed. But yeah, unfortunately I will have to piece this back piece, and it's the first piece I'm cutting out. It's making it also challenging, the fact that it is longer than my table. Okay, it's totally dark over here, but yeah, it's longer than my table. I can't fit the whole thing on there, so it's just like, I hope that this is the right length and everything. Yeah, that's a challenge. So naturally, here we are again, cutting out the front and going off the fabric, and more so in the fact that this is where I had to fix that hip spring, if you will, for lack of a better term. So really it's going off the fabric here. All of that has gone off the fabric. So that's gonna go quite a bit out when I'm kind of extending this line down. So again, I will have to piece bits in to the front. That's the front side seam right there. And I'll have to piece bits in, so, but again, the wool should be fine. It's just that the lining is gonna have piecing everywhere. Hey, guess what we're experiencing again? More piecing. Piecing is period. It's just frustrating and annoying and a lot of extra work that I didn't want to have to do on all of my lining pieces. So yeah, all of my lining pieces are now going to have piecing because don't use 44-inch wide fabric on this project at all, even if it's your lining, or you'll have to do this thing. So since I have all of those pieces, or like, you know, pattern pieces that need piecing on them, the next step that I have to do is take a whole bunch of like strips, for lack of a better term, and attach them, which means that any raw edges that are in those seams need to get serged first. So I am going to take each of those pieces and like serge where they basically like fell off, because with the fronts and the side fronts, it's a triangular piece basically that is sticking off the edge. So this is gonna have to get serged, and then likewise the part of the triangle that's the same part of the seam, that's gonna have to get serged. So I do have some scrap pieces because they're triangular that should, I think, work for those, hopefully. This one certainly will. I don't know if this one will. And then the part that goes in the center back, that's gonna have to be just like yardage. So I think I have just enough, hopefully, because I really don't want to have to like piece part way down too, but ooh, it's gonna be really close with it being long enough or not. So I hope that I can get out of it. I mean, like, I have a couple of yards here, but they're such long pieces. That piece I think was something like I'm gonna go with 70 inches, maybe more, because it was hanging about 10 inches off my 60-inch table. Those are on the fold too, so I'll have to serge down the entire side and then also serge the parts of this and then attach them all. So I don't know if I'm gonna do that tonight because it's like 12:30, I think, at this point. Yeah, 12:28. And I probably should stop sewing before I make like stupid mistakes. But at the same time, I had hoped to get everything cut out tonight, which clearly is not happening because I'm not going to cut out the wool until I have the lining pieces assembled, because then I can just take my lining pieces and use that as my pattern piece to make sure that they're the same and flatline them to the wool. And the problem with not getting them cut out tonight is that I really wanted everything to be able to hang out before I assembled it. I suppose it's okay if it hangs out after I assemble it, but sometimes I really prefer to have the hanging before I actually do the flatlining, just in case things stretch differently. So I don't know, guess I'm not going to get to do that because tomorrow I really hope to be able to get through even assembly, because I have, I think, the whole day basically that I can sew. Oh well, I will probably see you tomorrow when I'm actually doing things. So I have added all of my extension pieces to my flat lining, and now I'm cutting out the wool pieces. I have already cut out the wool for the back. This is so wide that I can't lay it flat on my table, so I decided I would cut it on the fold and then I will pin them together, flat lining everything afterwards. So now what I'm doing is these pieces are narrow enough that they can fit on the table, and I can just flatline as in pin in place and then cut and then serge around the outsides as I go. So I will go back after I do the rest of these. So there's 3 others after this. I will go back and pin everything on the back piece here. By the way, everything does fit totally fine on the wool. There were actually like 5 or 6 inches extra. Like for example, right now I think you can kind of see that crease line. That is the center, and obviously it fits just fine on there. So that's great. That means they're all going to fit just fine, and I'm going to have really weird strips of the wool, so that's not the best, but I should have plenty because there's a bunch of wool left, and I'll need to cut out the sides, but this is also not directional, so I'm actually thinking that I'm going to do these 2 front pieces like this. The other one will be down here, and then the side can go upside down in between, and then I'll do one other side on the next bit up, and then I have the rest for sleeves and for the collar yoke. So that's pretty great. Oh yeah, I just remembered I have to cut out, no wait, pockets are external on this. I have to figure out how to do pockets because I think they're like kind of welt pockets-ish. So yeah. Anyway, that's where I'm at right now. I'm going to do all of the rest of these and then start serging them and putting them together. So I'm working away at assembling my tea gown, and then I hear crinkling from the floor. And yes, this happened. Dora, what are you hiding in right now? Could you possibly be hiding in the tea gown pattern? Does it make a nice cozy cave? What do you think? What do you think? It is a very late Saturday night / Sunday morning, and I have done a lot of work today, and it's assembled. So basically what I did here was I flatlined everything, aka I serged it, and you saw that pinned in place, but I did actually go and serge all of the pieces, which felt like forever because, oh my gosh, these pieces are so long. Speaking of which, this looks just really too long. Like, this is pretty much set at my shoulder height right now, and it's only supposed to have a 2-inch hem, and I think in the front, I'll show you in the mirror, in the front I think that looks pretty true, but the back is not supposed to have a train, and it most definitely does. So once I had flatlined everything, I started assembling it. I did kind of mess up because I should have assembled this center back seam first, because this is all on one piece, but the center back seam is like in there folded together, or sewn together, and then you fold all of the pleats on top of that. So I did fold all my pleats, but I had already attached half of the back to the side back piece, which made it much more difficult. So do make sure that if you do this, you do your center back seam first. Now, I'm not sure in the actual pattern what happens here, because I thought that it says that you do the seam like this. Mine is going to be covered by the yoke. And this, for example, is just basted in place to hold them there, because really the yoke is going to come down below that. So I'm going to have to cut this down lower, because then the tops of it get hemmed and then basically put at the bottom of the yoke. So the yoke will come later. But I assembled all of my pieces, so that means that it is the side back piece, the front piece, the center back piece, and then etc. on the other side. So there's 5 pieces total plus all of the back decoration seamness, so it kind of acts like 6 pieces. And this is like kind of heavy, but the wool is honestly so light and so drapey, as you can tell, and then it's all just flatlined with the cotton sateen. But I mean, you can kind of see when I drop this, the form like full on moves, yeah, and rocks back and forth. Luckily, I put this on Lady Jane and not Antoinette, who would just fall over if I did that. So hopefully this will all fit me quite well. I mean, as we've discussed before, Lady Jane does not exactly fit stuff, even though she's the bootstrap form. She needs some alterations. So hopefully this will work with everything. It does seem like I have the overlap needed for buttons, hopefully not too much overlap. And I did cut out facings as well. They are here. I've cut them out of just like the scrap wool, but I can't actually put the facings on until the neckline thing goes on, and the neckline thing's going to have to be draped. So tomorrow, Sunday, I am going to try this on with my corset on and everything and see how that works, and I'll show you how that goes, and then that will be the end of this vlog, and all of the collar and sleeves and decoration and all that will be in the next one. Here we go with this tea gown. Okay, so I have it on. I obviously have not pinned it shut yet. I think I'm just going to kind of fold the facings out to the center. Well, not facings. I don't have facings on yet, so this is just the overlap. So I think I'm gonna like fold this out to the center and pin that in place so that I can check the fit. It feels like more than 1.5 inches at this point, so I'm a little bit concerned that I somehow made it too big, I guess. Yeah, not sure what's going on with there. And wow, the back pulls a lot. Like, it feels like I'm going like this sort of thing, and I'm not sure how to fix that, or if that's just how tea gowns are. But there's a lot of weight coming from like the back of the neck, and I know that once I lower it down a little bit for like being under the yoke, that might at least move more centrally into my body, because it'll be like here instead of up there. So that might help a tiny bit. But yeah, right now it's like really pulling. The other issue that I'm having here, I'll try to get far enough away, is that I think I just gave too much hip flare. I remember having an issue like this with, it was either, I think maybe Elsa, where like I don't know, I did my hips really weirdly, and so now I have little wings on my hips. So that'll be a really, really easy thing to smooth out. I am a little bit concerned there's like not a lot of volume in the front of the skirt, so I'll have to see that more once I actually pin this shut. But I mean, overall it seems close, as in like I can get it on and everything. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and pin this up and show you what that looks like once it is pinned. Silly forgetful me just realized why it seems so big. I didn't put the darts in it, which of course would have been much easier to do before I assembled it, but yeah, I forgot completely. So I'm gonna unpin what I've pinned now, put those darts back in since the darts fit perfectly on the mock-up, and then try it on. So it dawned on me that how I mark darts might be interesting to you guys. So what I've done here, because I'm not working with a paper pattern now since I already made adjustments to my mock-up, so I'm taking my mock-up, which has all of my darts marked on it, and I have put the mock-up away from the edge because I did increase that size there. But then I am ironing the mock-up out so it's nice and flat and so that it's lined up how it should be on the edge. And then I pin along my marks for the darts here. And I try to use my straightest pins as possible because it's really important that your pins are straight for this. And then what I do after I've pinned all of my darts in, and you just need to do like several points along, you don't need to do the whole thing. So I've done basically where they turn and then one spot in the middle. What I do is then I pull this back and the pin has left kind of a divot spot in there. And I take my friction pen and I just draw a little mark in there. So I do all of my little marks there, making sure that you put a dot too, like right at the end where the point comes together. And then once that's done, I will show you what that looks like. So what you're left with when you do that is a sort of connect the dots type thing. And then you connect the dots and it looks like your dart. And then you can just fold that up and pin that like any normal dart. But that is how I transfer my markings when I'm working with a mock-up as opposed to a paper pattern. All right, that is much better now that I've actually put the darts in. It fits really well. I haven't measured this lap yet, but eyeballing it, it looks about like 1.5 inches. So hopefully I'm about right on there. And if not, it's probably that I have more than 1.5, not less than 1.5. So that is great. It is still like mega pulling, like this is just coming up to choke me basically. So that's a little bit alarming. I'm not sure what the solution is for that sort of thing, and if it will be better once I have like the yoke and the sleeves and all of that sort of stuff so that it doesn't ride backwards. It also obviously, well not obviously because I'm off screen right now, but it definitely needs a hem. I have yet to decide if I want to hem this to heel height or to flat height because I feel like the Victorians in like the 1890s kind of always wore a low heel, but I don't know if that's true. Like, I don't know what they wore on their feet for greeting visitors in a tea gown. So I'm not really sure what I'm going to do, but I think I'm probably going to hem it to heel height because that just makes more sense to me. That way I can wear it with like my pumps or something like that. Or I don't know, I guess if there's a such thing as 1880s mules, I'm honestly not sure. So the hips are still funky. And I think I'm gonna honestly wait until I have the closures and everything done because that's just an exposed seam. I can fix that at any time, at least like, I don't know, even once I put the pockets in, I can still even fix that. The pockets I think are gonna be about right here. I'm a little afraid of doing the pockets because they are supposed to be kind of like welt style pockets and those scare me to death. So there's the possibility that I might do patch pockets because I'm afraid of welt pockets. I have done welt pockets on one project, which was an 18th century men's ensemble. And no, wait, 2 projects. I also did them on a Victorian men's waistcoat. And yeah, I don't like welt pockets. They're just, no. So I don't know that I'm going to do that. I think I might just do the patch pockets and like pretend that they're welt pockets because yeah. But anyway, it's fitting super, super well. Everything feels good other than me being choked by the pleats. So I guess that's the advantage of linen as opposed to wool, but I swear they made these out of wool also. And it's just like, I just want to do like this kind of thing and like get it so that it's not choking me. I know, this isn't good. Yeah, so anyway, now that it's like on, I guess the one other thing that I might change is you can see where it's gapping just a little bit at the back of the arm's eye there. I might just tweak that a little bit, pinched closed that seam right at that last like inch curve going into the arm's eye, but that's not a really big deal. So otherwise it fits well, the darts are fitting great, and yeah, it's just the funky hip thing and that maybe a little tweaky thing there at the arm's eye, and I'm happy with it. Also, this just feels like it's some sort of relaxed Elsa dress right now. Just throwing that out there. So anyway, that is going to be it for me for this vlog. Starting with the next one, we will start with the yoke collar and then the sleeves and the pockets and closures and decoration. So decoration's not very big, it's just braid, but that will all be in the next vlog. Hopefully I will finish it all within the next week. We shall see, you never know. So anyway, I do hope that you liked this video. If you did like this video, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. And if you'd like to see more videos like this from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I do post videos here on YouTube twice a week with my sewing vlogs like this out on Tuesdays and other costuming content out on Saturdays, but I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. That's at Lady Rebecca Fashions. And if you'd like to support me in all that I do on this channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi account down below. And I want to give a special shout out to my Edwardian level patron, Heidi. Thank you all so much for joining me this week. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing!